Hi, everybody. We are adjusting to a new norm now with most everyone around the world truly working from home. There's a lot of challenges involved in this. Certainly, companies are trying to work out the kinks and managers trying to lead their employees how to do this, how to adjust. Bill Detweiler, Larry Dignan, and Steve Ranger there in the UK, all of us here today to talk about this. You guys have a lot of experience in this and leading teams of people who are trying to adjust to this. Some of them have been working from home for a long time. This is nothing new. And for others, this is brand new. And it can be very challenging, to say the least. Steve, why don't we start with you here? You've passed on some really great tips for people to take a look at in terms of telecommuting, how to make it easier, kind of a 101 overview. What are you finding?
So I think that the point you just made, which is that maybe people have done a little bit of working from home, maybe they've worked from home for like 1 or 2 days, but now it's completely different. I think that's a really important point, that this is different to just a couple of days working from home or whatever. This is everyone working from home for quite large periods of time, and actually that's got a really different dynamic to it. You have to kind of take a long-term view. This isn't just about maybe sitting on the sofa and knocking out some words on a report or something. This is something that could be going on for many, many weeks. So that means it's a very, very different set of kind of criteria you have to think about in terms of team dynamics, about having the right equipment and all sorts of things. So this isn't just simply working from home on the sofa 1 day of the week. This is a really kind of massive step change.
Yeah, indeed it is. And one of the biggest things I think that people are running into, we all are, as we're trying to work on Wi-Fi and to the technical challenges that are involved in this. Bill, I know you've talked about this a good bit and trying to help people work through this. What's some of the advice that you can pass on that front?
Yeah, it's tough, especially if you're in an organization that maybe hasn't done this at scale before, because that's really what we're talking about. 20 years ago, we wrote a series on TechRepublic called The Pervasive Workplace. As the internet was allowing more remote work and telecommuting, people were doing work either at home or away. Even if they were in the office, sometimes they were still working around the clock, especially in the IT industry. So we had a little bit of experience with this, but it usually was a small group of people. When you have everyone in the office working from home, that difficulty really comes in. So there's a couple areas that are worth looking at for IT. One are corporate systems, things you can control. That's your VPN, making sure that you have enough capacity, making sure you have enough licenses, making sure everybody's tested it, making sure everybody can get access to it. And then looking for maybe unforeseen issues like a flood of new IP addresses that are coming in. That can be a problem. Cell phones. As we work from home, it's important to stay in communication. And do enough employees have corporate cell phones? Can those cell phones act as hotspots? Are you able to get that kind of? Are people able to use those cell phones to connect if their Wi-Fi goes down? Web-based tools, communication apps, video conferencing load. If you run big meetings or if you're running video conferencing systems, do you have the capacity to handle large numbers of people, not just 2, 3, 4 doing that? What about, and then there are departments you may not think of, like printer and scanner heavy departments. If you have legal, finance, those departments may rely on printing checks, printing documents much more frequently than, say, your average knowledge worker or an engineering department who are largely paperless. So how are you going to support those people at home? Are you going to allow them in the office? Then there are things like take-home hardware. Do you have enough laptops? What about monitors? Are you going to allow people to take monitors home if they need a wide screen? How are you going to monitor that from an inventory perspective? And then there's just provide remote IT support. This has been a mainstay for the last 20, 30 years. Before I was at TechRepublic, I worked remote support, I worked in IT. And so you get very good at diagnosing problems at a distance, but it becomes more acute when you can't have people come to the office and return a hardware failure. Do if you have a laptop with a broken screen, a broken keyboard, something doesn't work, that still required a physical presence to do that. So there's things like that you have to watch out for. And then lastly, I would say there are also things that you can't control. Residential broadband outages, making sure that folks have enough bandwidth to do what we're doing. I personally called my service provider and had them upgrade my internet connection when I started working from home. So things like that you can't control, you're going to have to take into consideration. And then one last point, I wrote an article 20 years ago around the pervasive workplace, like I was talking about. And just on a side sort of note, in terms of what you can do to not burn out as an IT pro working from home and supporting remote people is, it's different when your work is also your hobby to some degree. You can get burnt out on technology, especially if you're at home, you're supporting people all day, and then maybe you're using technology after that, playing video games. Take a break. It's important to kind of separate yourself too from time I'm going to work, time I'm going to try and be off. Hopefully your department has a rotating or revolving on-call schedule. You need to keep that stuff up too, because otherwise, it just like it was 20 years ago, whether it's a natural disaster, a natural part of being in IT, or now because of coronavirus, you have to avoid just getting burnt out by working all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Bill, some great advice there. And, I think one of the things too, we have to keep in mind, Larry, I'll pitch this to you is, having a little bit of grace with people, because this is so different, and having a dog maybe that's going to be barking in the background, or kids that are trying to do their schoolwork inside a home. All of it is making it even more difficult to learn to adjust to do our jobs inside our home.
Yeah, so culturally, the biggest difference here is, okay, everyone's working from home. It is the micromanager's worst nightmare, right? Like, how often is a micromanager sitting home going, oh my God, what are they doing now? What are they doing now? Can you just keep your video up so I know you're doing something? What are you doing, right? So working at home is almost harder because you're almost tethered to your screen more than you would be if you just went to the water cooler and talked to somebody for 20 minutes. So there's a cultural hurdle, right? And that's where I think right now we're at this stage where before you had remote teams, you had teams in the office, and it was kind of this hybrid thing. Right now it's remote work at scale. And that creates a lot of cultural issues. I mean, just speaking for us, we've probably all seen it, right? We've worked remote a lot. And our team's largely distributed, but now we're working with, other teams we work with where this has been a total sea change for them. So you're dealing with all these newbie issues like, hey, let's be on Zoom all the time. Let's talk. Isn't this great? Blah, blah, blah. And it just gets annoying. It's like, do your work, people. Like it sort of it's hard. Now my guess is they'll get over it and the novelty will wear off, and then we'll all get back to business remotely with a sort of different model a little bit. But culturally, it's a challenge. I do think there are a lot of other cultural things. I think the micromanagement thing, like you sort of got to let go a little bit. And the other thing with where we are right now with the remote work and just scaling it up, you got to have some empathy. Right? The dog and the kids and all that stuff, that is the least of our worries. You got to assume half your people are going to get sick. It's pretty much a given, right? I mean, you just look how this is unfolding, and not only that, we're like stuck in place. A lot of cities like, New York, San Francisco, I mean, we're kind of in lockdown. So that alone has its own challenges where, I think we'll find this thing where, like I'm just kind of just my neighborhood, for instance, right? There are a lot of people who have small businesses and work in the field, and suddenly they have 10 hours of time on their hands where, we're still working. We still have structure around our day, thank God. But it's a different thing, right? So even you're dealing with people who don't have structure, just, and you're worried about economics, you're working about job security. There's so many other things that are a distraction. So, the one distraction I've seen is just watching the news. Like we're in the news business, so it's kind of weird to say don't watch the news, but just go to the CDC site, or if you're in the UK, the NHS site or whatever. Like we kind of know what's going on. So I don't know if we need to watch headlines nonstop. right? Because psychologically, I don't think it's good. I don't think it's good for productivity. And, so I think, and there's not even sports, right? That's the other thing. There's not even a good distraction to be had, right? So I think, I think that's probably the biggest tip so far is just, you got to relax. You got to have some empathy because, you're dealing with stuff, so are your employees.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'd say one thing is I absolutely agree with what you're saying about the kind of the micromanagement thing. And because we all work remotely quite a lot, we're very used to kind of light touch, getting on with what we do. But actually, for a lot of these teams, like you say, that maybe have never worked from home before, have maybe worked one day a week or something, for them, I think it's actually quite useful to have a little bit more touch from time to time. I think things like video conferencing are really, really good just to kind of remind people the rest of the team is still there. Because a lot of people will work maybe just with one other person or work in teams where actually day to day they don't have much communication with the rest of their team beyond seeing them for a coffee or saying hi in the morning. And actually, when you take all of that away, some of these jobs can get quite isolating. So I think certainly maybe the first week or two when people are working from home, especially if it's a new experience, that little bit of extra touch is good. I think going up the kind of like the chain from rather than sending an email, maybe making it a phone call, or instead of a phone call, maybe making it a video thing, just to kind of remind people that the rest of the community is still there, that the rest of the team is still there, that you still have that kind of forward motion, that kind of like unifying kind of communication. I think is really helpful. Absolutely, you don't want people on video all the time or having micromanagers checking in every 5 minutes, but I think it's dangerous if you go the other way as well. I think getting that balance right is incredibly hard. And I think it's going to take weeks rather than days to get that right. I think, and different people respond in different ways. And actually from a management point of view, the management overhead might go up quite a lot in the short term before it comes down again, because a lot of what you do in work is around habit, right? When you're going, you drive to the same place every day, you get coffee in the same place, you do the same work. A lot of that stuff's changing right now. So that commute to work might be just going downstairs to a desk or going to the kitchen or whatever. People need to get those habits kind of back in place. It takes quite a long time for those habits to be reestablished. And then before you do that, that's where all this kind of like distraction can creep in, because once you break up that routine, then people are going to kind of struggle a little bit. So I think giving them that framework and checking in is actually really important. Just as important as making sure they've got the right technology or the right seat to sit in or the right screens, whatever, is kind of just giving them that kind of like framework again.
Yeah, I think what we're finding in the early going with remote work and remote work at scale, I guess I would say, is that there's a ton of gray area, right? So like Steve said, it's going to take weeks to figure out the balance. The good and bad news of this is it sounds like we're going to be doing this for a few weeks, maybe months. So I would expect if we have this discussion, a month from now, we'll probably have more kinks smoothed out and things like that. But yeah, what Steve said, I mean, the concept of office hours where you just kind of leave your Zoom open. I'm an adjunct professor and all the deans are doing that. Like just, you can pop in, and I've never popped in. I probably won't. But it's nice to know you can. And, I'll probably start doing something like that. I don't know if Steve's doing that in the UK or not, but it's a strategy that I think makes some sense. It's kind of like that replicates the open door office sort of thing. The problem is, we have continuous deadlines, so it's sort of like trying to figure out when to do that. So maybe it is a Friday afternoon thing, maybe it's a Monday afternoon thing. I don't know when to do it exactly, right? But that's a concept that might work too. But yeah, I mean, to Steve's point, there's so much gray area right now. I think the main thing is just don't do the pendulum thing, right? Like you can't be psycho micromanager, but you can't be psycho hands off either. I don't know what that balance is, and every org is going to be different, but you're going to have to find that gray area balancing act for sure, because I don't think either extreme is going to work. So that's probably going to change at scale too.
Yeah, and I think you might actually find out that the ways that you communicate as a team aren't necessarily the ways you thought you communicated as a team. So that while everyone might have like a 10 a.m. meeting or a whatever, that might not be the time when most of the information that you need is actually transmitted across your team. You might find that actually it was 3 o'clock when everyone goes and gets a coffee at the same time. That was the time when actually all the really useful information got shared around. So just because you put in place one meeting that kind of replicates what you used to do in the office, that might not be enough. You might need to think of other things. Like Larry was saying, I think that idea of like office hours where you just have, a time when people can talk to you about anything. That kind of thing is really useful because, you can't assume that just because you put meetings in place, that's when all the useful conversations are going to happen. They may well happen all around that meeting and not actually in that meeting. So yeah, it's like you say, there's grey areas, and kind of working out how you kind of replicate that stuff in a working from home environment is really hard, but really important.
And I think one more thing just to throw out there that I'm discovering pretty quick, I miss the old-fashioned conference call, right? We've all gone video happy, which all that's done is kind of chain us to our desk. So, I think another balancing act would be, hey, here's a conference call. I expect all of you to be walking while we're doing it. Now you're going to get wind noise. There's going to be, it might be a shit show, but it'll at least get people up doing something, even if they're just pacing around the house, anything. Like I wouldn't suggest doing burpees while you're on a conference call, but I do find the video was almost, it's more engaging, but it also changed you to the desk more, which if you're working remote, people need to get up and move around. So, the good old fashioned conference call could also be weaved in there too.
Yeah, I like that idea. Definitely not burpees, but I think just going for a walk or pacing around your own house is something we have to keep in mind. And I know, Bill, our team specifically, just seeing, and this has just been our first week we're in, of course, but just our, that we've had 2 group meetings or kind of everyone touching base on video. It's comforting to see everybody all at one time, for our psyche. I think that is good to touch base that way too.
Yeah, and Larry and Steve were touching on this. I think there's a balance, but actually seeing other people's faces, I think we started doing this years ago. We had one member of the TechRepublic team 10 years ago that worked remotely, and they would call in for conference calls, and we never got to see them. When we finally got a camera hooked up and we could see them, it actually increased sort of our connection to that person. I think their connection to us. And so everything in moderation, you don't want to overdo it. And I also think, during our meetings, that is something we did encourage folks to do is, look, it doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter how clean your room is. It doesn't matter if you're in your bedroom, your living room, your office, outside, your porch. That's fine. That's the new normal. Don't worry about the cat, the dog, the family members. But, log on. Let's do video for this one time. Let's everyone see each other. It helps with communication because you get that face-to-face connection. You get facial expressions. Something that may sound angry on an email or in a text or even on a phone conversation sounds, comes across differently in face-to-face. So it is comforting, but like Larry said and Steve said, everything in moderation. Not everything has to be a video call. Not everything has to be a conference call. You've got other instant message applications. You've got email. We've all kinds of different means to reach out. It's just that reaching out and reaching a rhythm and a pattern, like Larry was talking about, and Steve talking about, you go to coffee, you get into a pattern, and resetting team expectations is also really good. Saying, like, if your office hours are from this to this, we kind of expect you to be available. If you're not going to be available, just put it on the calendar, just like you normally would. If you're going out to lunch, if you're going to step away for 30 minutes, an hour, in our business, it's daily deadlines. Ooh, this story broke. This press release came out. This event happened. We need you to cover this. So it's important for us to do that. Other businesses, it may not be so important, but put that on the calendar. Let your supervisor know. Let your other teammates know. Maybe not everybody, but if you talk to someone on a regular basis, it's like, hey, I'm going to step away for a few minutes. I'm going out to run to the grocery store to try to get something. I'm going to go. I've got an appointment that I have to go to. Just stay in communication, regular, frequent, often. But, also, I guess it's, against what you just said, but in moderation, right? You also don't want to overdo it and
Sure.
burn everybody out. So it is finding that balance over the next.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the one thing that everyone's going to struggle with a bit, and we just have to work through, right? So a good combination of conference calls, video conferencing, emails, just like we're used to too. I think all of that together, eventually we'll find our new normal, whatever that may mean. But I do think what you said, Larry, though, a little bit of empathy will go a long way to help everybody get through this.
Yep.
All right, guys. Well, it'll be
note.
interesting to check in again on this. You know, like you said, maybe a month from now or 2 weeks from now, just to see how this is all going and some of the kinks that we're finding and how we're working through those. There, you guys as managers of teams, how you're getting through them. So we will certainly come back to this topic here in a couple of weeks and revisit it and see where we are. Until then, of course, a little bit of empathy definitely helps everybody. We hope some of these tips have helped you guys out there, and we really appreciate you watching.